Hotep family, welcome back to another episode of My Unapologetic Perspective. This is the podcast we give our point of view of controversial topics from our experience, Black history, and our knowledge as African Americans. Black history presently lives in us so we can continue to excel into the future. It's one thing to know Black history. It's another thing to take advantage of what the people in Black history did for you. I'm your host, Martre Baker Stevens, and to the right of me is Shaquan Battle.
Yeah.
And and to the right of him is Jerome Battle.
What up?
We appreciate all the love and support we've been getting. We thank y'all. Continue watching, continue to listen, and continue to support. Much is appreciated. As you said, congratulations to the LSU Tigers. Shout out to them girls that went out there and balled out. Shout out to Angel Reese for continuing to be herself. She did nothing wrong, and she deserved everything that she has accomplished. Shout out to her. How are y'all?
Good.
Good.
Oh, good. We're gonna jump right into today's episode. It's an important episode, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode is because the Major League Baseball game had just came out. The video game is it Major League Baseball, the show 23.
Yeah.
I believe so. And they have incorporated the Negro leagues into the video game. And then also Amazon, this is not an ad, Amazon released the Reggie Jackson documentary that I watched that's extremely fire. And I advise everybody to go check it out. But when you look at all of these things and you look back at Black history, like baseball is one of those things that really is important when you talk about race relations. As you go through the timing of baseball and things that they accomplished in baseball helped a lot of white America come to the thought process that these people are equal. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that they could play baseball with white players. Mm-hmm. And you had huge African American pioneers that played in the Negro leagues, and then players that jumped over to the major leagues that still created that pathway to show people what Black people are able to do on the field and off the field. And we still continuing to see that today, even though there's a decrease in African American baseball players. But maybe with this episode, maybe we could convince people to try to play baseball again, the African Americans, because it is an important part of our history. As y'all was going through this information, just give me y'all introduction on it.
To backtrack on what you just said, the reason why this topic is important, because the other day I was thinking, when we played rec league baseball, we probably could count on one hand how many Black kids played with us. And if you look nowadays, even in the major leagues, high school, college, there's not a lot of Black kids that play baseball now. Yeah. And one of the problems is it's pricing the Black kids out. Mm-hmm. Because now everybody plays travel baseball, travel softball, and for travel baseball and softball, it's anywhere from $500 to $2,000 just to play. Mm-hmm. And I know that's not a lot of money from where people are going to be viewing this from a standpoint, but if you take a household that maybe only has a mother and she has two kids that play baseball or softball, look at how much money you're dishing out for that. So I feel like right now, baseball and softball is pricing the Black kids out because a glove is not even under $200 no more. A bat is...
Wait, how much is a glove?
A glove is about $200 now. You might get one for anywhere from $50 to $100, but a good glove is gonna cost you about $200.
Man, I use my great granddaddy from the Negro leagues. God, dog.
He brought up a valid point.
That's right.
Because he said a good glove.
A good glove. Yeah.
The other thing is because you can go to Walmart, of course, you can get one cheaper than $200, right. But is it going to be a good glove? And people will say that it doesn't have to be an expensive glove. But there's a second part of this that I think is important for Black kids: bullying. Mm-hmm. So if you go out on the baseball field and you don't have a quality glove, not only are you Black, so you're an outcast, but you're also going to be bullied because you got a cheap ass glove. Right. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a different problem because I don't think that Black kids get bullied well by white kids. Mm-hmm. We don't just take that. So we usually lash out in some form or fashion. But the other thing is exactly what you said. It's not just travel baseball. It's that to play baseball, to even learn to hit or throw or catch a baseball requires at least two people.
Mm-hmm.
How many people in your household is going to be willing to go out there and throw a baseball with you or pitch one to you and let you hit it?
Right.
And then somebody got to go retrieve the ball. How many people willing to do that with their kids?
Yeah.
You're just not going to have a lot of black families that's going to have people that's willing to do that or know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that causes another issue. The other thing is it is a predominantly white sport. So you can almost count on being discriminated against in some form or fashion.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of parents don't want to put their kids through it. You know, I know that when I played baseball, I was discriminated against as a kid, and I had a tough time. I wanted you guys to play baseball, but I knew what you were going to have to deal with playing baseball.
Right.
Luckily, you guys were athletic enough that you were on the field. You really didn't have to deal with that. But it is a very discriminating sport. Mm-hmm. But sports has been the thing that I think from the black perspective, we feel like that white America will give us the benefit of the doubt. Mm-hmm. We really feel like in the sports realm. We can go all the way back to Joe Louis. When Joe Louis fought the guy in Germany for the championship. Yeah. America stood behind him for that fight. So he wasn't just fighting for a title. He was fighting for America. And America stood behind him. Mm-hmm. You see it in the Olympics with Jesse Owens. The America stood behind him just for the Olympics. Mm-hmm. So in our mind, we feel like that is an opportunity for us to show that we can be equal. And for a moment, we are. Just for a moment. It doesn't last long, but a moment is all you need. If you go back to, and you talked about this on the podcast before, the Negro Promise. You remember that book, The Negro Promise? Mm-hmm. It was a book of essays by some of the most, intellectual blacks in America. W.E. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington. Mm-hmm. I mean, the list goes on. And all of them had their different ideas of how you can create equality. Well, the one that they never mentioned was sports.
Yeah.
And obviously, we feel like that sports is a way that we can, at least at that realm for a moment, be considered equal. Fortunately, for baseball, that didn't really happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That didn't really happen.
Yeah, when you let's look at the history a little bit. We talked about on this podcast before, the Compromise of 1877, and what they ended up doing, especially in the South, was allowing white people to deal with black people how they wanted to in the South during Jim Crow. And then not too long after that, in 1887, you had Moses Fleetwood Walker and George Stovey were playing in a game in the South, and the other team marched on the field and demanded that the black players be removed from the field. And from there, that same day, the owners came back and said that they were going to refuse black contracts from now on in the Major League Baseball. So no, Jackie Robinson wasn't the first black person in Major League Baseball. He was the first person after the segregation that began to integrate baseball. Black people still continue to play baseball. They did what they would call the barnyard, where they would go around and they would just play exhibition games against different people. And then finally, there were 3 or 4 teams in DC, Philly, I believe it was. They created the Cuban Giants. That's right. And the Cuban Giants became a traveling team, and they played against white teams as well.
Because Cubans were accepted in Major League Baseball.
Some. So what happened with Cubans is it was basically strictly based off of your color. So that's you could pass for white, then they will allow you into the major leagues. But if you were black, you played in the Negro leagues.
The other thing is that even the American leagues would play in the winter in South America. So they accepted them because they had leagues that play year round. So your better baseball players would end up going to play in those venues in South America.
Yeah. So when barnstorming, they just, of course, go around, and then, blacks loved to play against white players back then because that was the measuring stick. That's Everybody considered the white players to be the best players, but the black players was like, until they play against us.
Until they play against
us. They'll realize who some of the best players is. I know they said Babe Ruth loved playing against black players because he knew what the talent was. And then they were playing each other, and then Mountain Landis became the MLB commissioner back in 1921 to 1944, and he stopped wanting white teams to play black teams altogether. One of the reasons was because the Detroit Tigers lost to a Negro League team 6 out of 7 times.
That's right.
And he was like, that wasn't good for Major League Baseball. Now, we're not saying that blacks dominated whites in the sport. What we're saying is they were competitive against them, and they would beat them as well as the white teams would beat the blacks. So it wasn't like they was just far superior than the other team. And then they created their own Negro League. Like you talked about, another part of the Negro League was the travel. It was hard traveling, especially going south or going to the Midwest when you got sundown towns and you got the sheriffs who tell you you better not play, and you can't go into hotels and restaurants. And then eventually going to Negro Leagues, they had hotels and black restaurants that was designated for those black players to go to, which is monumental. And then, like you said, when the Negro League season was over, they would go play in Cuba, Venezuela, Brazil, Mexico. A lot of people love playing in Cuba because if you go back and look at like things like the Black Panther Party, blacks and the Cubans were tight like that, right? And they felt free in Cuba more than any other place in the world. But sometimes they would play 2 or 3 games a day. You know what I'm saying? In different places. They also came up with the concept of the night game. Yeah, that's right. So when MLB seen that it was actually generating wealth and said people actually come out to the night games, they continue to do that. They also created the concept of East versus West. See what happened, Major League Baseball did their All-Star game during the World Fair. And then 6 months later, the Negro League Baseball did theirs, but they did theirs East versus West. That's right. So they would go out, the East players would go out to the West for 2 weeks and play, and then the West will come to the East for 2 weeks and play, so everybody can get to see all of the players. That's right. They still do that today when you look at East versus West. The McDonald's Basketball American game used to be the NBA All-Star game. Everybody does. Football. Everybody use the East versus West thing. The Negro Leagues made that popular. But just going through some of that information, like I'll let y'all.
Yeah, I'm with you with the East versus West, but just the All-Star game in general, the way that the Negro Leagues did it in comparison to the way the white Major League Baseball did it, it drew larger crowds. Yeah. And here's the thing. A lot of people think the Negro Leagues were drawing just blacks. No. A majority of their fan base were white people. Yeah. White baseball fanatics and people who looked at going to baseball games as an event. It was a Sunday event. Also, that's the other thing is Negro Leagues are the one who made Sunday baseball primetime. Right. So because people they even had it to where churches were letting people out of church early to go to baseball games on Sunday. Mm-hmm. That's what made it primetime. And Negro Leagues were the reason. So when we talk about integration, of course, there's pros and cons. But I think the reason that Major League Baseball decided in 1947 that they were going to allow Jackie Robinson to actually play in a baseball game, not just be on the team, but to play, is because of money. So the more players you have trying to prove that they can play at the same level that white people could, you can only do that one way, is that you need to go to Major League. Yeah. Also, you needed to be able to afford to be able to play baseball year round. Yeah. So at one point before the Great Depression, the Negro Leagues, the players was making just about as much as the white players were making in Major League Baseball. After the Great Depression, that went down. So it was difficult for a black person to continue to play baseball all year round and earn a living. So getting to Major League Baseball served multiple purposes. Major League Baseball wanted it because the Negro Leagues, at one point, they had 4 or 5 leagues going at the same time. Yeah. They were raking in money. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Negro Leagues back in the early 1900s, it said they made close to $300 million in a year, where Major League Baseball was barely able to do that with more teams and more games. There's documents that say that the teams in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and places like that, the draw that they were getting for one team to have one game on a Monday was more than what they were accumulating from having multiple teams playing multiple days a week.
Most people, and a lot of white owners seen that once blacks started renting their stadiums
facilities,
to play
that's
there.
right. Yeah, so they would rent them out when they had away games.
Yeah.
They would rent out the stadiums to the Negro leagues to play. They were raking in money.
They're packing it.
And at some point, they said, you know what? We need to get this revenue in Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
The other thing that the Negro League brought to the game of baseball was taking the extra base. Now, we're not saying that blacks were faster. We're saying that they were more aggressive on the base paths.
Mm-hmm.
Not just running, but hitting. Babe Ruth used to watch Josh Gibson.
Josh Gibson.
Used to watch Josh Gibson. And people used to call Josh Gibson the black Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth said, no, I'm the white Josh Gibson. You know? Now, Josh never got, because a lot of people get Josh Gibson and Bob Gibson mixed up. Josh Gibson never played in Major League Baseball. He was a Negro League star who people thought was going to be the first player to play in Major League Baseball. And Bob Gibson came a little bit later on, actually won a couple World Series.
You ever, I don't think you ever told the story on here why you was a Yankee fan.
Yeah, man.
He told it before, but tell it again.
Reggie Jackson. So I had an opportunity when I was in New York to play to the way old Yankee Stadium was situated. There was recreation baseball fields in front of Yankee Stadium. So you would play baseball on those stadiums, on those fields. And I remember one day we were playing on that field, and after the game, so you can't arrest me now, we used to try to sneak in a Yankee Stadium and watch games. Well, we did. And one day we were standing out there waiting for our opportunity, and Reggie Jackson walked up. Said, hey, you're number 2 on the baseball field, right? Yeah. He said, you ever been in a baseball game? Now, I didn't want to say, yeah, not legally. Not legally. I just said, no. He said, you want to go in one? And he looked at me and said, legally? And I was like, yeah. Mm-hmm. So he let us in the game. He let us in the game. And I got to watch the Yankees, got to watch him. He had 2 home runs that game. The first one was we talk about this all the time. This is when I started learning strategies. The pitcher threw him a curveball that started at the eyes and ended at the knees, and he hit it about 500 feet to right field. It was almost like he was waiting on it, you know. So just going to the game, first having somebody like Reggie Jackson let you in the game, who at the time, I didn't realize that he was going to be the baseball pioneer that he was. But he ended up being a baseball pioneer, not because of just his play, but because of the things that he said. Mm-hmm. He was truly a pioneer. Him, Dave Winfield. These are people who talked about how blacks were being treated while they were playing. Mm-hmm. So they didn't wait till their careers was over and then came back and said, you know, when I played in this stadium, they were racist. While they were playing, they made statements about organizations that they played against, but also organizations that they played for.
Yeah, because he had a problem with the manager for the Yankees.
For the Yankees, absolutely. Yeah. But everybody had a problem with him.
But. Before doing this episode, I wasn't going to talk about Jackie Robinson because, of course, this podcast is about, we like to talk about things that are a little unknown to a lot of people. But you can't talk about the integration of baseball or baseball pioneers without mentioning Jackie Robinson. You just can't. And I know a lot of black players during that time felt that they were the right person to go to Major League Baseball over Jackie Robinson because they didn't consider Jackie Robinson to be the most talented player in the Negro leagues. Of course they didn't, right? Josh Gibson was one of them. Papa was one of them. You just knew Jackie wasn't one of them. But even if you look at today, right, let's just look at the NBA draft. You don't draft based off of a person's success in college. You draft off their ability, the potential, their prospect ability of what they can be. And I think everybody kind of felt that Jackie Robinson, what he could be, based on the dude played lettered in 4 different sports at UCLA.
That's right.
The damn dude can play, and he can play in integrated sports. the way he refused to get up on a bus while he was in the military.
That's right.
And created national headlines. He was court-martialed, and the NAACP got involved. So he could deal with public scrutiny.
That's right.
You knew he could play because he was in the Negro leagues, right?
That's right.
So when you add all of those things together, maybe back then they thought he wasn't the right choice, but I think we all could agree today that he was the perfect choice for going.
Absolutely. And you had to have picked somebody who you would believe, because this has to work both ways. Because if you're the team that's signing him and he goes out there and he acts like what they think he really is, he's black, he's going to react a certain way, then you disprove the whole idea that blacks can play on the same playing field.
Yeah.
Because play, like you said, is only part of it. The other is conduct and character, how you can conduct yourself in certain situations on this baseball field, right. Because you don't represent Black America. You represent whatever team you play for.
Yeah, for sure.
So how are you going to represent this team? You can't pick a person that you know is going to act out in a certain situation and run to first base, and the first baseman call you a nigga and you punch him in the shit, right? Because the average black would do that. You have to have somebody that's going to be, yep, I'll be your nigga. Wait till I get up to bat again.
Yeah.
You had to have that. You can even talk about Hank Aaron. When Hank Aaron was getting ready to break Babe Ruth's record, you had him and his family getting death threats. Mm-hmm. You had to have the right guy in this position to do these things, because otherwise this whole thing gonna blow up for Major League Baseball and for Black America.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
So Jackie was that important piece. And then of course Jackie Robinson, when you go and you look at history, he was one of the first ones to say, I cannot stand for the national anthem, and I cannot stand and salute that flag knowing what's going on in this country. He was one of the first athletes to do that, you know what I mean? Before his death, he spoke at the World Series that I think Reggie Jackson was playing in. Right. And he said, I hope that one day I'll be able to look down that third base line and see a black manager in that position. So when you talk about what Curtis did, Curtis Flood, Jackie Robinson was one of those players that stood up and stood behind him. I mean, you can't talk about baseball without talking about Jackie Robinson. They may have thought he was a plant from the beginning.
That's right.
But what he did after me, the guy was Rookie of the Year, and he continued to get better and better throughout his career. You can't wiggle out what that boy was. Like you said on the buzzer room, they can't erase what we were.
That's right.
I feel like Jackie Robinson did something that Dad always told us to do. If they're gonna use you, use them.
Use them. And Fleetwood also, I think, gave an insight into the athleticism of blacks. Mm-hmm. Now, we were known to be fast and we were known to be strong, obviously, while they deemed us to be good slaves. But what they did not think is that we could make adjustments on the fly to certain things without saying, I want you to run from here to there and back, right? Mm-hmm. That's simple. You run there, you come back. But can you make adjustments on the fly? Fleetwood did something for people that play baseball. He did something that you don't even see happening in Major League Baseball today. Now, mind you, in 1887, when he played, he played for the International League, or the Independent League, which were whites and blacks playing together. They didn't have gloves, so everything was barehanded. So he was a catcher. And he gave a sign for a curveball. And the pitcher threw a fastball and told him, ain't no nigga gonna tell me what to do. So he went out to the mound and said, you want to throw what pitch you want to? That's cool. You ain't gonna cross me up ever again. I will catch whatever you throw. I didn't even got to know what's coming. That's brutal for any catcher with a glove, let alone not having a glove. And like I said, for people that don't play baseball, try to catch a wiffle ball. Just get behind them. That's what it's like, because you have no idea where it's going or how fast it's coming, and you got to catch it. And Fleetwood was able to do it. That's incredible athleticism. For those that don't know anything about baseball, like I said, throw a wiffle ball and try to catch it. You'll understand.
I'm still stuck on niggas won't play without a glove. That hurt.
I got to give love because it's just in my nature. To the three pioneer women in
yes.
black baseball, right? You got Constance Morgan, who was one of the first 3 African American women to play in the Negro leagues. Tried out for the Indianapolis Clowns while she was in business school. They were so impressed with her skills that they ended up replacing her for for Tony Stone at second base. She was called lightning fast, and she hit around 300, batting third in the lineup. In the Negro leagues, batting third in the lineup. That, like, for the people who know baseball, like, batting third is crucial.
It's crucial.
We just had that conversation.
Yeah,
yes, we did.
You had Tony Stone. She tried out for a Catholic boys school, all boys team, Little League baseball team, and made it. She tried to play softball and realized she didn't want to play softball with the girls. She wanted to play with the boys. She continued to go to the baseball school, and she would harass the manager every day. He said every day he would tell her to go home, and she would pop up a few minutes later telling him, "Hey, you got to watch me play. You got to watch me play." By the age of 16, she was playing in the Negro leagues. When she played for San Francisco in the Negro leagues, she made the All-Star team. And the rumor has it that Satchel Paige pitched her a fastball, his famous fastball that said people couldn't hit. And she had a single off of Satchel Paige back in 1953 in the exhibition.
I just would want to know if there was a way we could ask him, was that true? Because I know his answer would be crazy.
Tony was the big draw, though. Yeah. Tony, everybody wanted to see Tony
Stone play.
Everybody wanted to see Tony Stone
play. And then you had Mamie Johnson, who also played for an all-white boys baseball team, and the only African-American on the team, and she helped them win 2 division titles. She signed with the Indianapolis Clowns, too, which was a predominant Negro League baseball team. And she replaced who other than Hank Aaron.
That's right. And
she went integrated.
She was like your boy in the Angels right now, Shohei. She pitched and hit.
But they said she would pitch 6, 7, 8, 9 innings, striking out her fair share of players. She was 33-8 in her career as a
pitcher, and 273 as a batter.
I don't like that coming from a Nationals fan though, telling me about Hank Aaron.
But they said Satchel Paige showed her how to pitch the perfect curveball. If you watched A League of Their Own in the 1992 movie, where Hank showed Dottie how to throw the perfect curveball, that came from the story of Satchel Paige and Mamie Johnson. Now, all 3 of these characters are in the new A League of Their Own. They're all rolled up into one character named Maxine. If you watch,
that's right.
I was wondering where that came from because that was not in the movie, right?
No, what's on Maxine's character?
Yeah.
No, they added that, so they're based off of those 3 women.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to mention Effa Manley, because even though she was not black, she was raised basically in a black household. Her mom was white, but her stepdad was black, and she identified as black, which is unusual for somebody to do in the early 1900s. But she identified as black, lived her life as black, and of course she was treated as black. And she was the first woman inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 1935.
So like I said, you had women playing, especially like you said, like if you watch A League of Their Own, especially when the men went off to war, a lot of these women really picked up the game and played the game very well. A lot of black women played the game fairly well. Mm-hmm. But Satchel Paige, they consider him one of the greatest pitchers to ever live. You know what I mean? And,
showmanship.
This dude was playing in 1926 in the Negro Leagues. 1926. I want to keep that in mind for a second. 1926, he's playing in the Negro Leagues.
That's right.
They said he would travel over 30,000 miles a year playing for any team that'll pay him.
Speaking of that, that's something else we want to point out.
Yeah.
Is that was kind of the blueprint for what they call the minor leagues today for Major League Baseball. Because he was a farmhand, which he would go play for any team that was willing to pay that money.
Anybody that pay, I'll come pitch for you.
That's
right.
Know
what I mean? They said he pitched a total of 2,500 games and won 2,000 of them. Paige, they said he played an exhibition game against one of the greatest hitters in Major League Baseball, Rogers Hornsby. And they said he struck him out 5 times in one game.
Yeah.
They said in Hollywood, Paige scored a spectacular 1-0 victory in 13 innings over Dizzy Dean, who won 30 games for the St. Louis Cardinals that year.
They talk about some of the myths.
Yeah, so even when you go back and look at Jackie Robinson integrated, a lot of people thought it was going to be either Josh Gibson or Satchel Paige.
That's right.
Satchel Paige went a little bit after Jackie Robinson. Josh Gibson ended up dying like 3 months before Jackie Robinson played his first game. But in the he was the oldest rookie playing in the major leagues.
41? Was he 41?
They don't know because they don't know when this dude was born. They said he would continuously lie about his age. So he helped lead the team to the World Series. But he played until they think that he was 59 years old his last game.
Yeah. He talked trash too. The first thing is, you know how true it is, but they say that there are several times in the game where he told all the fielders behind him to put their gloves down.
It's good to put the gloves down, go into the bullpen. I'll need you.
I ain't gonna need you. But he had names for all the different pitches that he threw. And he had one pitch that was called B-ball. And he said the B-ball is the ball's gonna be where I want it. That's what his B-ball was. He had a name for every pitch that he threw, and he had about 8 or 9 different pitches that he would throw.
Yeah, if you watch the movie Soul of the Game, there's a scene where he does that, and Jackie Robinson at short base. I don't think this is a true story, but it's good content for the movie. Well, Jackie Robinson is at shortstop, and Josh Gibson is up to bat, and he tell everybody, "I'm gonna strike Josh Gibson out." So everybody go into the dugout, and Jackie Robinson wouldn't move, and all of this other stuff. But it was a good scene to just show.
I think, well, some of that is not true, but I read where it said that he intentionally walked the batter.
Yeah, they said he did do that against Josh Gibson. They said that was true. That it was 2 outs. He walked 2 straight batters to put the bases loaded to get to Josh Gibson and struck Josh Gibson out. But let's just get to Josh Gibson, man. Like I said, they called him one of the greatest hitters to never play in Major League Baseball. Right. Like you said, they call him the Black Babe Ruth. But Black Babe Ruth considered himself the white Josh Gibson. That's right. But he dropped out of trade school in 1927 to play for the Negro Leagues. He is believed to, in the Negro Leagues, have 10 consecutive years of winning the home run. The most home runs for 10 consecutive seasons. It's reported that one season he had 84 home runs.
Yeah, we just celebrated Aaron Judge for hitting 62.
84, right. And then they said he hit probably over 800 home runs in his career. That's right. Now, he played a lot of exhibition games, so he played in a lot of different games, but they believe that if he was in the major leagues, that he would have broke Babe Ruth's record, and then Hank Aaron's record, and then Barry Bonds' record. Probably wouldn't even came close to.
Yeah. Cool Papa Bell. I thought his story was interesting. They said that he could turn the lights off and get into bed before it got dark.
They say he would run the bases in 12 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think the record in Major League Baseball was, I think somebody hit an inside the park home run, and it took them almost 14 seconds to run.
That's right. And he taught one of my favorite players, Lou Brock. Lou Brock learned from him the art of stealing bases, because there's an art behind stealing bases. So
yeah.
Cool.
But real quick,
Papa Bell.
I want to go back to because there's a story on Josh Gibson that I don't know if it ain't true, but it's funny because when you look at, like I said, when you look back at Black baseball players, they were essentially heroes at the time. Mm-hmm. So they were your superheroes that you looked up to. So I'm gonna read this. It says, one day in the 1930s, the Pittsburgh Crawfords was playing at Forbes Field in Pittsburgh, where their young catcher Josh Gibson hit a ball so high and so far that no one saw it come down. After scanning the sky carefully for a few minutes, the umpire deliberated and ruled that it's a home run. The next day, the Crawfords were playing in Philadelphia when suddenly a ball dropped out of the heavens and was caught by the startled center fielder on the opposing club. The umpire made the only possible ruling. Pointing to Gibson, he shouted, "You're out yesterday in Pittsburgh." But they also believe he got one of the longest home runs in Yankee Stadium.
Yep.
But again, he never got to be able to play in the Major League Baseball. He went through some mental health stuff and ultimately ended up dying like a few months before Jackie Robinson made his debut.
At 35 years old.
Yeah.
What's crazy is he was diagnosed with a brain tumor in 1943.
Yeah.
Continued to play and even got better because he hit 393 for non-baseball fans. That's a really good batting percentage.
That's right.
In 1945, and then in 1946, he led the league in hitting with batting a 331, all with a brain tumor.
Absolutely.
You know what all this taught me when all this research is that I'm right when I say Pete Rose is one of the great baseball players ever, man. Let Pete back in the game.
But you know, speaking of Pete Rose, Hank Aaron said something. And be quiet. So that's one of the reasons why I love the Reggie Jackson documentary. But it was a 2 or 3 minute window when he was speaking to Hank Aaron. I'm like, dang, I wish I could have got 2 hours of Hank Aaron.
That's right.
You know, no disrespect to Reggie Jackson, it was a good doc, but I was like, dang, I wish I could have got 2
Get
hours
to the source
of Hank Aaron, right? But he talked about how when he was getting close to Babe Ruth's record, people just kept saying, "Oh, you're just trying to pass Babe Ruth. That's the only thing you're worried about is Babe Ruth." And he said, nobody said that to Pete Rose when he was chasing somebody else's record.
That's right.
Nobody said that to him, but I had to deal with that. But when you look at Hank Aaron, no disrespect to Babe Ruth, he was one of them ones.
That's right.
I'll just get it clear. He was one of them ones. But I gotta hold Hank Aaron above Babe Ruth because of what Hank Aaron had to go through to get there. You know, Babe Ruth had a smoother journey to get to 715, something like that, right? To Hank Aaron having to go through death threats. You know, the U.S. Postal Office gave him a plaque for the most mail received non-politician, and one of the FBI had to go through his mail. Yeah. And once somebody threatened to kidnap his daughter. Imagine that when you're up to bat, and you're about to hit a home run, and you could think about, if I hit a home run here, I may get killed. Harm may come to my family. Like that's a difficult situation to be in.
I hate the comparison though, and here's why. I've said this about every sport, and we usually talk about it from the basketball realm. But what Babe Ruth did, damn his color. But what Babe Ruth did is, when you're doing something that has never been done before, a remix is easy. Yeah. You got the platform already. It's hard to do something that's because you don't know it's spectacular, right? You're just going out playing baseball, and you're hitting home run after home run. You don't know the significance of that yet. You don't know the significance until 40, 50, 60 years later, when all of a sudden somebody gonna break something that you did that you didn't even realize the significance of. Yeah. For me, and I'm not going to compare what was easier. I would say that in Hank Aaron's life, his lifestyle, living, was probably going to be a little more difficult than what Babe Ruth endured. But in terms of playing the game baseball, you can't make that. I can't make a comparison because Babe Ruth was doing something that had never been done before.
That's true, but I just can't ignore the pressure on somebody's shoulder. I just can't ignore that. I can't ignore the fact that you have to go through so much and playing in Atlanta in the South.
Oh, absolutely.
And going to play in the Midwest and constantly getting graved about because Babe Ruth is the greatest baseball player that we don't want you to break the record.
But you think that could have been motivation?
I'm not saying that it wasn't. I'm just saying that even if it's motivation, that there's still so much pressure that comes with it.
Oh, absolutely. But so if you make that, if we were comparing apples to apples, you say, let's just say Babe Ruth was doing that in the Negro League, right? Would you think it was more comparable then?
If Babe Ruth would have, it wouldn't have been a problem. I think black people would have celebrated it.
You don't think he would have had to deal with racial slurs?
No. I think you would have probably deal with racial slurs. Yeah. But I think black players would have loved to see Babe Ruth play.
I would just like to see,
because if you ask any of those Negro League players who their favorite player was, they're going to tell you that it was Babe Ruth or Ted.
Yeah. And speaking of Ted Williams, he was one of the people who agreed that the game of baseball needed blacks.
Right.
He was one of the people who came out openly and spoke about that the more blacks that Major League Baseball had, the better the game would be. See, a lot of these people play, and of course, blacks play. We talk about Hank Aaron because hitting home runs. I don't fuck about hitting home runs. He was playing baseball.
Yeah.
These people live the game of baseball. Ted Williams, for people that don't know, Google Ted Williams, one of the greatest hitters to ever play baseball. They play baseball for the love of the game. They don't give a shit about a record. These people don't care about records.
Yeah.
They care about playing the game and having an opportunity to play. That's all they care about.
While we're on Hank Aaron, this dude, at the time when he was playing, I got to read this because it's important. Aaron holds the MLB record for the most career runs batted in at 2,297. Extra base hits, 1,477. Total bases, 6,856. The total base record is remarkable in context. At the time of the retirement, he had traveled over 12 miles farther on the base paths than any other MLB player in history. It's huge how great of a player he was. And let's just give Atlanta Braves some love. He also played with his brother in Atlanta. And in one game, they both hit a home run in the same inning.
Big 44.
Tommy hit a home run, a solo home run, and then Hank Aaron hit a grand slam to win the game.
Big 44.
Whatever.
Big 44.
But then you got on the Washington hat.
That's all the Washington teams.
Yeah, but the Nationals was on there.
What did you guys, doing your research, when did you find out that you didn't know that you think is important to how you view either the Negro Leagues or Major League Baseball?
I'll start with, I'll actually go with a story, which is Curtis Flood's story. Because what he did didn't just change baseball, it actually changed sports in my mind frame. So Curtis Flood played 15 seasons in Major League Baseball, and back then, when you were on a team, it was basically for life, unless they traded you or released you with their contract. So, but you had as a player, you couldn't decide where you wanted to go.
That's right.
And they ended up trading him, and he refused to go, and he ended up taking the MLB to court. And when he took him to court, his lawyer told him, "Look, even if you win, you'll never play baseball again. And if you lose, you'll never play baseball again." And he said, "Is it going to make the players better in the future?" And they said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, let's do it." And when he took it to court, like I said, the only players that stood up for him was one guy and Jackie Robinson. No current players stood up for him, even though they were fighting the same fight that he was fighting. But everybody else was scared to say something. And Curtis Flood ended up losing 5-3 in votes. But what ended up happening was they went away from that for-life contract that allowed players free agency, the opportunity to get out of a contract and say, "I want to choose what destination I want to go to without being traded or without being released." As you see, that's what's making the NBA, the NFL, and Major League Baseball a lot of money, is players getting to choose their destinations.
That's right.
And creating a game where you can kind of control the narrative a little bit as a player and make it more lucrative for owners to be able to offer contracts like you look at the NBA, free agency is one of the best things in the world.
That's right.
Like that's one of the most popular times on TV. Major League Baseball, free agency. We want to know, they already try to, what's my man name for the Angels? They already try to figure out how much money this man gonna make next year. Yeah. You know what I mean?
$500 million, probably.
That's definitely.
But Curtis Flood's story was huge for me when looking at what he was able to do and to never be able to play in baseball again afterwards.
For me, I would say like the research on Satchel to see how he traveled. It pretty much reminded me of what the women of the WNBA have to do now. Is once they finish playing here, they have to go overseas to play. And that's mainly where they get their money from, is overseas. But to see what black people bring to a sport, like, hey, y'all, put the gloves down. He ain't hitting the ball. And to be able to strike people out. And I think they said over his career, his ERA was like 2.3, which for baseball fans. I mean, for people that's not baseball fans,
That's awesome.
That a 2.3 is awesome. So just to see what he brought to baseball, and them deciding to go with Jackie Robinson versus him, because I don't think he would have responded so well to the things that Jackie did respond well to.
I found the thing that's been consistent with what we have done in America from day one, the resilience, the determination to do something that was important to us. And if white America wouldn't have us, we created our own. We, during that time, there were over 7 different Negro leagues created. Some of them didn't last long, but the fact that blacks came together and said, this is something we want to do. We think it's important. How can we do it? And selling it to, of course, because during this time, if you go back to the 1800s, when we first started thinking about how we can play this game, blacks didn't own land. So where you going to play it? Where you going to practice at? To have the marketing tools to go convince people who had land to allow you to use it to play baseball. We talk about, you see the movie all the time, Field of Dreams. Well, who the fuck do you think the first ones to do that? Go to some farmer and say, we pay you money to use your field to play baseball, right? Blacks, because we couldn't play anywhere else. So the resilience and the determination, the forethought of how you can create true, what we call integration, is to have a way to generate revenue, because we all agree that one of the determining factors of being able to have Jackie Robinson play in Major League Baseball in 1947 is that the Negro Leagues were making money. How can we get some of that money? So the fact that we created a financial avenue, to me, is just tells the tale of how resilient Black Americans have been since the start of this country. But also saw that the same hatred that we see today was tenfold back then. That they don't even want you to play baseball? Baseball. And it wasn't just the opposing teams. You had teammates that didn't want to play with you. I'm trying to help you win, and you don't even want me to play because I'm black? The level of hatred based on color in this country, and I've said this many times before, further proves this country was built on that shit. You say what you want. The proof is in the pudding. It was built on racism, discrimination, and white supremacy. Black people cannot be equal to whites. Don't want you in the playing field with me. To me, that's telling. Very telling. To the point of how we see it even today.
Also, what was big for me is, when you look at Jackie and Satchel and Josh Gibson, and how they talked about how Hank Aaron talked about that's who we looked up to. And then, you had players like Willie Mays, and he looked up to Hank Aaron, and
Lou
then
Brock,
and then you
Frank
got
Robinson.
then you got Reggie, who looked up to Willie Mays, and then you had players that came after you. Talk about the Barry Bonds, the dad and the son, Ken Griffey, the dad and the son. You had them come in. You talk about the players that they looked up to that were black. It's like that one strong chain link that goes from the Negro Leagues to the Major League Baseball.
That's right.
You see those players that thrived in Major League Baseball still carry that spirit of the Negro Leagues.
That's right.
And I believe that's important, because like they're so connected through each other.
That's right.
You can literally look at, it's like ancestry, right? It's like a tree that goes down, that starts with Josh Gibson and them, or Fleetwood, and then Josh Gibson, and then to Hank Aaron, to Willie Mays. It's beautiful to see, because all of those thrived in the major leagues.
Yeah, when you listen to Frank Robinson was the first black manager in Major League Baseball. He talks about the same thing. But there's a guy that's currently a manager in Major League Baseball that he talks about the same thing, but people don't talk about him because he's still in the league. Dusty Baker. If you listen to Dusty Baker's story,
I will always have love for Dusty.
Absolutely.
Always.
You'll see why this guy is so confident in what he does as a manager. Is because of those people that played the game in the Negro leagues and then got the shot in the National League, and all the things that they went through, all the things that they taught, not just how to play the game, but how do I deal with the media? Because media is white America. How do I deal with that? How am I supposed to be able to deal with that, live my life, and play this game that I love at a high level? How can I do that? Dusty Baker talks about it. You know, Frank Robinson talks about it. But you won't hear anything from Dusty Baker because he's still in the game, and people are afraid because they don't want other people to start looking up. Everybody get their flowers when it's over. Yeah. Nobody gets their flowers while they're still alive or still playing the game. I would like for Dusty Baker to start getting his flowers now while he's still in the game.
In 1971, the Pittsburgh Pirates fielded the first all-black and Latino lineup. And I'm going to read this because it's funny. It wasn't really a major thing until about the third or fourth inning. And Dave Cash was sitting next to me, and one of us said, "You know, we got all brothers out there, man." We got a chuckle because it was no big deal to us. We really had no idea that history was being made. I thought that was beautiful to see, to hear somebody say that, "Hey, we got all black people out there. Ain't nothing wrong with that."
That's right. You know what I mean? That's very symbolic to what happened in Houston, college basketball, when they started five black players. And at the time, the coach didn't recognize that, you know, and it's because they were basketball players to him, you know, and it's funny that you always have to find somebody that's willing to take a chance and say, "I'm going to do this, even though I know I'm going to get backlash," because it's the right thing to do, or in most cases, because it's the profitable thing to do. But nonetheless, we don't give a shit. We care about opportunity. How we get the opportunity doesn't matter to us. Just give us the opportunity. And time again, we'll continue to show you that we are just as good, if not in most cases, better than our counterparts. We just need the opportunity.
Go ahead.
I was going to say to your earlier point, if like, I know for us, our generation is Ken Griffey. So when you look at Ken Griffey, so doing this research, as I'm reading about Reggie Jackson, Josh Gibson, in my mind, I'm imagining Ken Griffey Jr.
Yeah.
He embodies all of those things because, like I said, I didn't see Hank Aaron play, but when I see the highlights, I'm like, Ken Griffey embodies that. So when you see the backwards hat up to bat, you know, if you think about in rap, Mace and Diddy in the video wore the green hats backwards because Ken Griffey wore his hat backwards.
That's right.
Yeah.
So just, you know, like Ken Griffey is the reason why I play baseball. Is the reason you play baseball. Yeah. And to see him embody all of those things, like now, I don't know who that would be for this generation.
Aaron Judge.
And I think even as black players, like, you look for that black representation. You know, we looked for Ken Griffey. We didn't necessarily look like, you know, for certain other players that maybe were black, but we didn't kind of gravitate towards. And there's no disrespect to like the Puerto Rican players, the Venezuela players, like a lot of players that are black when they come to America, but they're not African Americans. They're not FBA, right?
Right.
But we look for those FBA people. Like when I look at, like the way I look at Ken Griffey, I'm looking at what's his name? Jazz Chisholm. That's why I'm looking at him now. Somebody that takes our culture to baseball, to Major League Baseball.
And the culture is the big part. Because you gravitate to Ken Griffey, not because he was an extraordinary hitter. He brought that style. He brought his style, our culture to the game. Because if you think about it, why didn't black people gravitate to Derek Jeter? Now, I'm a Yankees fan, and I can tell you most of black America did not gravitate to Derek Jeter.
No.
Why? He didn't bring that flash to the game. He just played the game. So for us, sometimes it takes a little more than that to get us
similar
interested.
to Tim Duncan in basketball.
Absolutely. Yeah. Why didn't we gravitate? He didn't bring that flash, right? We gravitate towards flash. You know, why was Deion Sanders considered prime time?
Yeah.
He brought flash. He didn't just play well. He bought that flash, right?
Yeah, and if you want to get kids to sit down and watch somebody, like they'll watch Jazz Chisholm, like they'll they'll watch him right now.
That's right.
Like you can't even get kids to sit down and watch a full NBA game. You definitely don't get them to sit down to watch a Major League Baseball game. But if you could show them clips of Jazz Chisholm, Mookie Betts, you can get them to show players like that. You're like, okay, we might play.
Bring that culture to the game, man, and it's important. And it's at every phase. We do it with every sport. We like the culture being part of the game. That's what we gravitate to.
It's funny because we me and you had this conversation yesterday watching the baseball game where I told you every time Ozzie Albies swing the bat, he got to step out of the batter's box, bring his chains around, because they spun back. It was Soto for the Padres, where the big Jordan symbol.
That's right.
Acuna, where the big 13 as they running around bases.
We bring that flash, man, and that's what. Not just us, but it as we talked about before, when we talk about the way that Black people talk, you now hear white America not only talking that way, they're claiming that it's theirs. You know, so we but at the end of the day, we know that that's what people especially Black Americans gravitate to, is the culture.
Absolutely.
You know, and some people call it being flashy. You call it whatever you want to. It's the culture, our culture. We're flashy people. That's what we do.
But yeah, so a lot of people don't look at baseball as being part of Black America, but it is. When you go back and you look at the major leagues, when you look at the ownership, you look at the coaches, you look at the managers, you look at the players, you look at the fans. It's definitely an essence that we embody, that we should be proud of, and that we should continue. Because I think last year's World Series was one of the first World Series in a long time where there was no African American player on either team.
That's right.
And just seeing a dip in the number, especially I think it was early 2000s, the number just been drastically going down. The number of African American players. Now you're going to find Black players, but we're talking about African American players in Major League Baseball. But we love y'all. We appreciate y'all. Peace.